Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the stream. I'm Ian Douglas. I'm the author of this website, techinterview.guide. And if you've been around Twitch for more than a month, looking at any sort of technology channel, you're going to know this guy right here. So give a huge shout out, warm welcome to Mark Dobossy, aka Finite Singularity. Mark, it has been amazing. The anticipation having you on the stream has been palpable, for sure. So I really appreciate you taking some time. I know your family's out watching a movie, and I'm sure
Yeah.
you'd rather be watching a Marvel movie and stuff. But
Ah.
appreciate you hanging out. Which Marvel movie are they watching, by the way?
I think it was the Shang-Chi one for
Oh,
like
too
the
good.
14th time. So,
I think we only watched it once or twice, maybe.
yeah.
Well, I know I've watched it at least 2 or 3 times. I think my kids have only watched that one once. Yeah, we're big fans for sure. We're definitely a Marvel family around here. Stream dude, Zooey, good to see you in chat. Howdy, folks. Um, so yeah, Mark, you're more than welcome to drop stuff in chat as well if you
Okay.
want to switch in another window.
Yep. I've got it. I've got it open right here. I can see you, chat.
Awesome. Chrissy, good to see you in chat. It says I can't stream when I have to watch this.
You
Exactly.
do
Yeah.
have
What?
to watch this, Chrissy.
Yeah. Or you could just stream and like host it. Host this
Yeah.
channel. We gotta find out some way of like just getting everybody in a single stream and just have like a ton of us all banter back and forth. I think that'd be great.
That sounds
Um,
fun.
cool. So we're gonna hear a little bit about Mark's background, how Mark got into tech. Very atypical journey, which is actually very typical for the kinds of folks that come by the channel. A lot of folks are career changers. They're getting into tech for the first time. I spend a lot of time mentoring and coaching people who are looking for that first job in tech, but most of them are coming through like a code school or some sort of self-taught kind of program or 100 devs. A lot of folks coming through from 100 devs. And so I'm excited to kind of hear more about your background, how you got into programming, all that kind of stuff. And then yeah, I mean we'll cover all kinds of stuff. I got some questions about skiing. I've got
Okay.
some questions about just Minnesota, like just all kinds of stuff. So
Sounds good. Sounds
RC
good.
Maniac,
It'll
good
be
to see you
fun.
as well. So give us kind of the pitch. Who is Finite Singularity? How do you even come up with the name Finite Singularity? So give
So,
us some
so
background,
the name origin story, right? This is supposed to be a big thing on Twitch, at least I guess
right?
from all the gamers out there. It actually all went back to when I was doing, I guess it was my second postdoc. I've had multiple postdocs. One didn't work out so well, so this was the one that worked well. We were writing this fairly complex code about injecting CO2 into like deep formations. Saving the world, like keep the greenhouse gases underground kind of stuff, right? And when you model the flow of fluids, you can end up having things go wrong and you divide by a zero and you call that a singularity in the equations.
Okay.
But it's obviously not finite because you're dividing by zero. So we had an issue with something like this going on. It was on a big giant computer cluster. I think it had like
Okay.
1,200 nodes or something where we were doing computation. And it took me weeks to actually figure out what was going on. And it had to do with a numbering of a node because we were using the numbers of the nodes as an index, clashing with something. So we weren't actually dividing by a zero, so we referred to it as the finite singularity bug. And from that point forward, every time we had a little crash in the code, they would say, "Hey, Mark, are you going to go find another one of those finite singularities?" And so when I started up the stream, I thought, maybe
Well,
we'll
what
go
you
with
know, right?
finite singularity.
That's
So,
awesome. Mine's a little more down to earth. My 736 is a shout out to my wife. It's actually how we met online. I was on an online dating website, and I was a paying member, but my wife was not.
okay.
And so I was sending her messages, and she couldn't even read any of them.
Ah,
But when I tried to sign up, I was trying to sign up just as Ian Douglas because that's my name. And this one site that I was on just threw some random digits on the end of your username, I guess in an attempt to assure like uniqueness. They were
got
they
it.
were just cycling through like everybody got a 3-digit number no matter whether your username was unique or not.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I got Ian Douglas 736, and she couldn't read any of my messages, and so she actually found me through AOL Instant Messenger. She was a
Okay.
big user, and I'm like, well, if I got that username, I'm just going to use that username everywhere. So if people want to get in touch with me, they can find me, and she did, and it was kind of one of those like, oh, creepy but awesome. Like my wife stalked me online, found me online,
Hey,
and
it worked.
It worked.
I think it's
Yeah.
much less creepy back then. Although I don't
Well,
know.
this was
Like,
2003. It was creepy to meet people online
okay,
back then. Yeah. Nowadays
yeah,
we
I mean,
call
because
complete
back then
strangers
they
to
always
like
told
drive us
you
around
like,
in their car.
don't meet strangers on the internet and never get
Right.
in a stranger's car. And here we
Right.
are in 2022 summoning
That's
strangers from the
exactly what we
internet to
want.
go get in their car. It's a, you know,
Exactly. Yeah. Good times.
I didn't make that joke up. I won't claim that.
Yeah. For sure. Well, I'm a big fan of dad jokes and dorky, geeky humor and stuff as well. So yeah, we met for coffee and we've been together ever since. I actually took her back to that Starbucks to propose, which was awkward, but because she hates Starbucks, she didn't tell me this until like well after we were married. I'm like, you want to go get Starbucks? She's like, no, I actually hate Starbucks. I'm like, what?
Yep.
All this time and you hate Starbucks? So she's a
Yeah,
keeper.
RC Maniac saying was gonna say a well-known joke now with Uber Lyft, but that's what a true dad joke is, right? It has to be a joke that's been repeated at least 1,000 times
Thousands
to
of times.
become a dad joke, right?
Right.
It's part of how
Yeah.
you make a dad joke. So.
Right. Well, you know when a joke becomes a dad joke, right?
No, it's when the punchline becomes apparent,
That's right. Yeah.
or it's all grown. Either works. So.
Yeah. Oh, ground. That's a good one too. Good times. I think you can do bang joke in chat if you want more of these fabulous puns. My stream is nowhere near as interactive as Mark's is, so I bow to the skills that are Finite Singularity. Definitely go give him a follow. You can go check out Mark's information and see if that's going to show up in chat. Come on, chat, really? Mark's information, there it is. Okay.
There you go.
So I'm playing around with Streamer Bot and trying to play around a little bit with the voice activation.
Yep.
And some of it works really well, and some of it doesn't work well unless you very clearly enunciate your words, and that's not me most of the time on stream.
So real quick story about that, if you don't mind.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
were talking about your wife. This is actually a quick story about my wife. We had moved out to New Jersey together for when I was, doing grad school stuff, and she got her first cell phone. And it was,
Okay.
this is like 2001, 2002, and cell phones were expensive and everything.
Sure.
And cell phones were just getting these features where you could like record something to like dial someone's number.
Right.
And the directions said, record yourself saying who you want to dial naturally. And then it'll dial it for you when you push the button and talk. And so what does Mrs. Singularity do? She wanted to put her parents' number in, and she pushes the button and she says, Mom and Dad. Like with a beat like that. So now every time she wanted to call her parents, she had to do this sing-songy, Mom and Dad. So,
Too funny. Yeah, but then again, like back in 2001, that would have been like the old Nokia brick phones, which are like completely indestructible and probably still work today and last for like a month at a time on a charge.
Motorola of some sort. We didn't know then that the Nokia phones were made out of titanium or some such.
Right.
It was not known at that point.
Yeah,
so.
for sure. They need to make everything out of those things nowadays. And of course, as soon as Riker hears me talking down here, he's got to come. He's got to come make a visit. So hello to Riker. He's just begging for cookies though. He doesn't code nearly as well as Roscoe does on Finite's channel. So yeah, you can definitely go check out Mark's channel and see his puppers, Ollie and Roscoe, and all the antics they get in. Well, although Ollie mostly naps. I think every time
Ollie
I've been
does
on your
mostly
stream.
nap until he decides he wants to annoy me, and then there you go. There's Ollie and Roscoe.
All right.
Oh, actually, those are both Ollie. I didn't
they?
hit the Roscoe one. There's Roscoe. We got to get them both in.
There.
I had to make emotes of the dogs. I mean,
Of course.
how could you not?
Well, I had to steal somebody else's emote of a dog, but it's a great little like confused husky sort of.
Oh, that's a good one. That is a good one.
Yeah. This is how I feel most of my day while I'm coding. It's like, what? Huh? And I've been doing this a long time. So one of the things, Mark, that I really appreciate about your channel, and we talked a little bit about this before we went live, is the idea of what I call learning in public, where you're not afraid to like just I'm gonna live code in front of a lot of people. And what's interesting is you've got this cool like freelance kind of business where you're working on this like construction asset like timeline scheduler sort of application, all the things around construction, like booking equipment and booking people's time and all this stuff. And it's fantastic to watch you work and just see the scope of what you're building And I use your Tau software for a little bit of the Twitch interaction. So if anybody follows tonight, you'll see the lights blink behind me, and that's all running through Mark's software. Well, mostly through Mark's software. Some of it's my own Python script to actually make them blink, but your code's like in the Docker stuff is handling all the interaction from Twitch. But just seeing the quality of what you build out as both a back-end developer as well as the front-end UI, and then to watch you on Twitch, like when you're kind of in your downtime where you're working on like your actual overlays and things like that, to see this creative side of your brain where you can like go into the photo editor or whatever photo tools you're using, like After Effects, and like make all these like glow and flame effects, and you're like, oh yeah, it's just this and this and this, and I'm like, the two halves of my brain are like oil and water, like they don't mix. Like I can be super logical, or I can like go sit down at a piano and like compose music, but I can't do both at the same time. How do you do that?
What you don't see me doing is all of the tutorials I watch on YouTube to figure out how to do a lot of this stuff.
Right, but you do, but what I appreciate is just the nature of kind of this learning in public, where you're okay with just coding, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't work, you'll show us your debugging process. And I think that's really a key thing for senior devs to do, not to show that we make mistakes, but like to show people what our process is, because we all have to go look things up. I was telling Mark, I did a live stream this morning for work where I had to go look up the JavaScript thing to go get the epoch timestamp for today. Like, how do I do that again? I got to go look up that real quick, and pulled up a browser and showed people what I Google searched, and like, oh yeah, this is what I want.
That's the least vulnerable part of the whole thing. Just having to look up functions like that. What's always gotten me is with GitHub. GitHub to me has some of the same downfalls that Facebook has, right? And stick with me here for a second. It's a very different platform, of course. But back in the day, back when I had a Facebook account, when I like didn't have all this gray hair, and I got rid of Facebook long ago. But one of the things that I noticed when I had a Facebook account is you always saw the best of everyone. You saw when they were on their vacation. You saw when they had finished remodeling their house. You saw when they had a baby. It was always this curated view of things. And I think to a very large extent, especially on some of the larger projects on GitHub, you're seeing the best of code on GitHub, right? On these large projects, the code has gone through review processes, and the PR process can be, it has a lot of steps, a lot of people looking at the code. And before that, when it was just one developer working on that code, they might have worked on that function for a week and perfected it before they pushed it to GitHub as this little piece of the code that they were pushing out. And we as developers, we look at this code, and it's this beautiful, elegant code in many cases, and we look at our code and we're like, that sure as heck isn't the code I typically write, And so I think there's this disconnect in our brains where we can always look at what someone else did, and without the context of all the work that went in to get that there, compare what we've done to that. And the reality of it is, as developers, as coders, we all write crappy code. In fact, I would argue that most people write more crappy code than good code. And what makes a good coder is that they can then go back to that code and make it better and improve upon it. And that's part of the process. And it was one of those things when I first started live coding, as I said before, it's a vulnerable process. You're putting yourself out there. And I just kind of had to say, you know what? I've got to really try to internalize the fact that other people are doing the same type of stuff I'm doing. They're not writing this amazing code. They're struggling through. And for me as a developer, I thought, well, I would have loved to have seen that when I was getting into development, seen a more senior dev working on something and struggling with it, and maybe not writing the best code and then coming back to it and improving it. Seeing that is a natural part of the process, I think is really, it's really important. And it's one of the things that I like to put out there for people to see.
Yeah, I like what Greenwind just said in chat. I've been coding for 15 years and I still can't write perfect code the first time. I'm a big fan of like make it work and then make it better.
Exactly.
Like, there's no point trying to make something better if it doesn't work in the first place. So like get it working and then improve it from there. And even RC Maniac says too, like iteration is important, and that's absolutely right. So good to see the newcomers. Wolf, good to see you in chat. Interact with you a little bit on Finite's stream. So Yeah, definitely drop questions in chat if you got questions for us. We're gonna chat a little bit about kind of your background and how you got into
Yeah,
programming and maybe a little bit about the software that you build and stuff like that. So,
absolutely.
how did you get started in coding? Like, what was like your first sort of like I was on a computer and I did this thing and
Yeah,
that got kind of got
so
you hooked.
it's one of those like it's one of those almost like storybook stories, right? In terms of how I actually really the first lines of code that I wrote when I was probably around 7 years old, and we had a TRS-80 color computer
Crash
that my
80.
dad had
All
gotten.
right.
And my dad had gotten it for his business. It must run in the family. He ran his own company out of our house as well, and he had no idea how to use this thing. He just knew he was supposed to get a computer, got it, and it just sat there. And I started playing around with it, and there were some games that he got for it and stuff. But one day we went to Radio Shack, and they had a magazine there called Rainbow, and
Okay.
Rainbow was a basic programming magazine for the TRS-80 color computer, because
Interesting.
Radio Shack sold TRS-80 color computers,
Sure.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so the guy that worked there, and it was totally the stereotypical kind of bigger white guy with a huge white beard that worked at it was very much like, not to put people in a box, but what you'd picture as the like mid 80s phone freaking geek person, right? And every time we'd walk in, he'd have one set aside for me, and he'd be like, "Oh, there's a couple good games in here for you." My
Oh,
dad would
nice.
buy me the magazine,
That's great.
and I'd take it home and I'd type this basic code in and run the program. But we only had like 2 floppy disks, and one of them he used to store some stuff on. So I had 1 floppy disk. So if I decided I liked that game, I had to delete whatever was on the
Oh,
floppy disk and put
that
that on there.
decision is brutal as a kid.
It,
Like, do
it
I
was.
sacrifice this game for this other game? Oh, that's
Yeah,
rough.
but then I mean,
Mhm.
about the most advanced I got, maybe by the time I was about 8 or 9, I would go in and I would kind of like try to change colors of the spaceship,
Right.
or
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I didn't really have the concepts of loops and functions and things like
Mhm.
that, but I could see, oh, here's where we're doing the color for the spaceship, so I want to make it red instead of blue, or
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
whatever it
Now, was
was.
this old like the equivalent of ASCII art where you just had like the little blocks and stuff like that, or were you actually doing like bitmask or bitmap?
No. It was ASCII art stuff,
Okay.
almost exclusively. I think there were a few things we did that were more kind of vector art kind of stuff.
Right, right.
But that was kind of how I got my start coding, and then I went a while without coding at all. Right, middle school, high school, sports, girls, all that kind of stuff. So suddenly coding wasn't the cool thing. However, in 8th grade, my parents dangled in front of me. They said, if you get straight A's, we'll get you your own phone line. And I think my mom was thinking maybe
Ooh.
he can like call some friends and stuff instead of sitting in front of that stupid computer all day. And
And now
sure
you
enough,
use
I
the
worked my
computer to call your
tail
friends
off.
all day. Yeah,
I worked my tail off, got the phone line, and then promptly started a BBS that I ran
that's
out of my
awesome.
bedroom, which I
That's
ran
great.
all through high school and absolutely loved doing.
Fantastic.
And then when I went to college as an undergrad, I took a C programming course my first year, and got into this research program. I was in civil and structural engineering, and I got a research fellowship my junior year and senior year, where I was doing earthquake engineering stuff, and had to do all this programming for modeling these. They're called Magnetoreological Dampers. Basically, they're pistons that you can change their damping properties by running current through them.
Oh,
So
interesting.
it's a little magnet on the inside, and it's an iron-based fluid that then thickens if the magnet goes through it, so it makes it harder to compress.
Basically,
the
Minecraft pistons running off a redstone.
Yeah, basically,
Yeah.
with a
Great.
couple little extras, with some very, very expensive fluid put in them.
That's great.
And while I was doing that, I was talking to another professor who taught that programming course, and he said, "Mark, I need a TA, and I don't have a budget for one, so can I kind of pay you some cash on the side to TA the lab for the computer programming course?" And that's when I started teaching programming, and I found I really, really loved teaching programming. And then went on to grad school to do, the PhD stuff and all that. And while I was there, I was at a university that had a very, very theoretical, very famous computer science department, but very theoretical based. And I was finding that I didn't have the, there were no classes that would teach me how to program. There were classes that would teach me, how to theoretically make the perfect kernel, but not how to actually program.
Right.
And so there was this big void there. And so I offered to teach a programming course. First, it started as C++ for other graduate students. It started off actually as kind of informal. I would just meet with people like 2-3 times a week, and we talk about things they were programming. And they were all working in like MATLAB, but needing to convert it to like C++ because of speed issues.
Sure.
And then when I became a postdoc, they asked me to formally put together a course. And so I taught a course there for about 5 years. That was a formal C++ course that started, we started graduate students that had not done anything outside of Excel, and we were having them do like some simple parallel stuff on like using something called OpenMPI on like multi-CPU systems by the end of the course. And it's amazing what motivation can do, right? You try to teach a programming course to someone who just wants to learn a language, which is great, and you can teach it, but you tend to get so far and people get frustrated and the learning process slows down. Now you take a grad student who needs to get their PhD dissertation out the door, and they need to be able to get their simulations to run in less than the age of the universe, and they're very, very motivated to learn this stuff.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so they're willing to fight through, which was a really really fun experience for me. And I ended up teaching some Python as well. But that's really where my love of teaching this stuff kind of came from. Then I went on and I did this postdoc. The first postdoc wasn't my problem, but certain funding issues dried up. So I had a PhD, and a thing about having a PhD is it takes a while to find a job. It's not like PhD positions, at least where you're getting valued for your PhD, they don't just come along, right? And so the head of the department said, well, I know you're doing structures stuff, and he was doing environmental engineering. He said, our programmer just left and he did a terrible job, and I know you know how to program, so if you can come in and help us put this together, I'll hire you for 6 months to do that as sort of like a research specialist so that you can find a job while you do this. A couple trips to Norway later to learn all the algorithms and stuff that they were using, and about 2 more years, and we spun up a company to actually do this modeling for the carbon capture and storage industry. So it's something that went well, right? It actually was a whole lot of fun. I spent a couple years doing that. We had a lot of government funding. This was back 2009 to 2011, 2012, when carbon capture and storage was taking off like crazy. And unfortunately, not getting political at all, but Obama was never able to get his environmental policy through. And around 2000, right around the beginning of 2012, that entire industry completely imploded because all the funding went away. And I ended up doing a short stint doing some modeling for various oil companies, which uses a lot of the same algorithms and stuff, and then jumped into fintech, which
fun.
Oh no.
Yeah, I said I would hate the sarcasm. My first job in California was in fintech. We were processing credit reports for people.
Oh, gotcha. Well, we were trying to model like these crazy household portfolios for extremely wealthy families and factor in all sorts of stuff. And we built out all the tools, and then the group we were doing it for, they were getting money hand over fist, and they said, thank you for building this, we no longer need your services.
Yeah.
Wow. And then took everything we built and went on and made millions. So it was not a good time. But I had this construction company that I had been off and on doing work for basically all through grad school. It was kind of like one of my side gigs. I built a whole web app for them back in 2004 to 2006 kind of time frame, where they would do time cards and track their equipment and stuff, all built in PHP without any libraries, direct into MySQL. I mean, it was the kind of thing that was probably a complete security nightmare, but I didn't know any better, right?
sorry to interrupt. My favorite thing about the whole PHP MySQL nightmare was in their documentation of this is how to connect to MySQL using
Yep.
PHP
Yep.
allowed for SQL injection attacks, like right in their documentation. And I
Mm-hmm.
mean, what's the first thing we do as programmers? We take that
Read,
block of code, we paste it in
copy,
our code, and
paste.
we're like, it
Exactly.
works. Yeah, and it
Exactly.
like left everybody open. Like, here's how to do like a simple SQL command, and it
Yep.
wasn't doing any of the binding parameters or anything, and it was like SQL injection waiting to
Yep.
happen.
Yep.
Yeah, good times.
So I built this little app for them. It did like half of what they needed to do in terms of this stuff. And they used it from then up until 2017. And
Oh,
2017 was right around the time that the whole fintech thing was falling apart from underneath me. And literally, it was this serendipitous thing where the owner of the company, the construction company, called me and he said, "We want to basically fund you. We don't care how much it takes. We want a
wow.
system running. We'll pay you like a yearly salary to put it together. You can own all the code that you write and sell it
What?
to other people, but we want
Wow.
to bring this thing up to, the 21st century. We want
Yeah,
it to
yeah.
be mobile. We want it to do all the things." And that began the best client relationship I think I could ever
Yeah.
imagine having,
Wow.
which I've had for the last 5 years, and building this very big and comprehensive construction field logistics app. That's how
Yeah.
I try to put it in as few words as I can, but it does everything from tracking, GPS tracking of equipment all around the metro area here, to jobs, to job planning and dispatch and time cards and material tracking, and you name it, it does it.
Wow.
Basically, their accounting software exports from into the system at the beginning of the week. They work all the stuff during the week, and then they import it into the accounting software at the end of the week and cut payroll and invoicing. And it does everything in between, which
Yeah.
was a really fun project to work on. I'm hopefully within weeks of like feature completeness and kind of version 1.0 being done. We're really close, and that's going to start the next big adventure. And so now it's going to be, I've been interested in your channel because I've got a big decision to make here in the next 6 months. I need
Okay.
to take a look at the software I've written, and I believe it to be a fantastic idea that I would love to scale up into something. Everyone I talk to in that industry is like, "We needed this years ago. When can you get this in my hands?" And the issue is, I need to hire people on in order to get into people's hands, but I
For
need to
sure.
get into a bunch of people's hands before I can hire someone on. So it's this
Yeah.
big chicken egg problem, and how am I going to sort out, scaling this thing up? But being the sole developer on such a big project, I haven't had any brain space to think about anything outside of just what the next day was going to bring. And
Right.
so now I'm really relieved that I'm going to have some time once it's sort of feature complete to say, okay, now we can
What's
sit
next?
down, we can put together a business plan, we can, do the things we need to do to see if this is possible, maybe seek out some funding if we can. It'll put me in a position where I can actually do the things that you'd normally do when you start a business, but it came so fast and furious at me that I just had to pick it up and run with it. And now I'm to the end, and I'm like, okay, now what do I do with it? you
Right.
know. Otherwise, I got to make the decision that I need to now take a step into the more traditional software development, employer-employee relationship, and step into, a company. Or I don't even know what that would look like at this point. So I
Uh,
really do appreciate you and other streamers who talk about this stuff, because I've got my blinders on all the time. I'm looking at what I'm doing in front of me because it was out of necessity for this thing. And so it's great to start to get some exposure, to kind of know what my options are should I not be able to figure out a way to make this thing scale up and
yeah.
do what I need to do with it. So,
I mean, you and I should probably just do like the equivalent of 100 devs but teach people like back end design, like
yeah,
APIs and stuff like that. We'd make our money there for sure.
absolutely.
So yeah, no, that's awesome. It's a great story for sure.
So yeah, that's been the journey, from a like PhD, really heavy academic background. There's definitely blind spots that I have because of that. I haven't worked in traditional programming teams before. It's always been very small groups, or I as a sole developer. And so that's a skill that I would need to learn. I am going to need to learn whether I scale this thing up or I, decide to go work for a company. And, things like Git. I suck at Git. I'm always like, every time I do a Git command that isn't like commit or push, I like hover my finger over the enter key and I'm like, is this the right thing, or am I about to blow everything up?
Right. Yeah.
So I just, a lot of skills that I do need to pick up. I think going out on my own and doing this though it's given me the confidence that I can figure it out. Can I figure it out fast enough? We'll have to see. But I know I can figure it out, and so I think it would. I think there's good things ahead. So.
Yeah. No, that was a great intro. that was a hey, tell me about yourself. Yeah. No, I think it's a really interesting sort of path to think about how you kind of went through this journey and you end up like teaching other people and exploring the idea of like, I'm going to go do a thing and then I'm going to like show people around me what I do. And sort of level them up and see what they're now capable of doing.
Yeah.
And just kind of sparking that idea in their mind of like, what can I do with this? I think that's what gets me fired up about being a teacher. Is like, they're gonna go do something cool with that now. It's like they're gonna like they got that idea. Like, what are they gonna go build with that? But then kind of branching off, like no pun to get, but kind of branching off to doing your own thing and working on this construction software. And I was saying like, wow, like they're letting you own that, where a lot of companies are like, yeah, we own that. Like we're paying you, we own the software.
Exactly.
That's like really unheard of.
What we did was actually really brilliant. They're trying to get me in front of people because they want it to be supported, right? They want to know that I have enough coming in that their software that they run their business off of is going to have the support it needs.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
So I think it's actually a really smart way for them to look at it, and a very forward-looking way for them to look at it.
Yeah. Well, you got an army of people in chat right now that are willing to come work for you. So
I need the money first, y'all. So if I had the funds, I would. That's
just do what all the startup founders do, and just pay them 100% equity to start. And good times. Greenwind says that they'll even buy into it. So there you go.
Okay,
there's your funding round right there.
We'll talk.
Yeah. Good times. It was funny hearing your story about the TRS-80. I started with a Commodore 64. My dad came home with a C64, and I remember doing a similar thing. I forget what the Commodore 64 equivalent of the magazine was, but I know eventually, like Byte Magazine, they were coming out with like basic code. And you'd go home as a kid, and you're like coding this thing up and flipping from page to page, and then you lose track, and it's like you start playing the pinball game that you just made, but then halfway through, you're like, oh wait, why am I in a spreadsheet? Because like, you hit the next. Yeah, well, no, like you hit the next page or whatever, and you weren't keeping track of where you were in the code, and you're supposed to jump like 20 pages ahead, and so like what you thought was a game is like half spreadsheet, half pinball game or something. Yeah, will code for food. There you go. Heisenballs is ready to go. So good to have all the first time chatters. So thanks for that. Follows are free, so feel free to follow along. So I like to help people out with tech interview preparation and career advancement advice and things like that. I've been in the industry probably as long as Mark here. I've been doing it professionally now since '96. But I moved down to the States in 2000, started working in fintech and went through a lot of startups. Most of my career has been working at startups and very much consider myself kind of the Swiss Army knife engineer of I can do a little of everything. I'm not going to be amazing at everything, but I'm kind of what we call that T-shaped engineer. I can do a lot of things, and I do some things really well, but something not so much. Like the creative side of what we do, it's like I'll make it work, you make it pretty. Like I struggle really bad with front end and CSS. I can write JavaScript, but I don't know anything about React. Like, don't get me going on mobile. Like, it's not my strength, and I'd rather play to my strength. But it's interesting to kind of hear what you're saying about like having the students that you were teaching at the university with that mindset of, when we share what we do, like what's that saying? The tide lifts all boats or whatever, right? The rising tide lifts all boats. And the whole catchphrase of my channel is share what you know and we all win.
Absolutely.
And so that's why I have a lot of admiration for everybody on Twitch and other live streaming channels. Appreciate the follow, by the way. So all the blinky lights you see, that's thanks to Mark's software. Um, that's controlling all those actions. But appreciate the follow. Um, the whole idea of like I'm gonna live code, or I'm gonna do leak code problems, or
Yep.
we're gonna talk about resume reviews or whatever, like just sharing that knowledge with each other and kind of commiserating to some level about like how tough it is to get a job in the tech industry, especially that first job in tech.
Yep.
It's really hard. And so I empathize with where you're at, where you've got all this experience and you're
Yep.
like, shoot, do I go work for somebody else now because they're going to make you do leak code problems for your
Yep.
interview, which is garbage. It's like, why? Like, why do you make us jump through those hoops? I had a Google recruiter reach out to me, and they're like, "Hey, we're hiring for our developer relations team." I'm like, "Well, I'm really happy at Postman, but like, what's the like, just out of curiosity, what's your interview process like?" And they're like, "Oh, there's like a bunch of rounds of technical and a lot of behavioral kinds of things, and then we have you do this live coding." And I'm like, "Is it leak code?" And they're like, "Yeah, it's leak code." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm definitely not interested."
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I've been doing this for 26 years. Like, if that's not enough to get me past, like, okay, maybe we don't have to do a leak code problem, then
Exactly.
but yeah, good times. Greenwind, thanks for hanging out for a little bit. So yeah, so I had a very similar start where, as a kid, it kind of caught on. I did a lot of BBS stuff back in the day as well. Never really ran my own BBS. I entertained the idea, but my parents were always a little like, you really have to hog up the whole phone line. And then they bought me my own phone line and my own
Yep.
computer.
Yep.
And once I think I started with a 386 and started upgrading the processor all the time.
Yep.
I just
Yep.
kicked into like this.
Mine was run on an Apple IIgs. Talk about a strange platform to run a BBS on.
Yeah, good times. I actually went to school with a guy named Scott who actually wrote, was it Maximus BBS or something like back in the day?
Okay.
It was like one of the more popular platforms.
Yep.
And he actually wrote it, and he was in like 8th grade when he wrote that software. He was like the nerd's nerd, where he was like going in and learning all about like the UART chips and how the modem actually controlled everything. And he like streamlined the BBS software to where it was like really highly efficient and effective. And
Nice.
yeah, he had a lot of fun working on that all through school. So yeah, good times. Bulletin board systems for sure. So yeah, if you've got questions for Mark or myself around like tech industry or career advice or anything like that, feel free to drop those in chat as we go. Otherwise, we'll drop Mark's information in chat from time to time, and you're welcome to go give him a follow if you're not already. I imagine a bunch of you already follow Mark, but they definitely appreciate your time here. So, very atypical start, but your background even goes a little bit more interesting than that, because I was on your stream the other day, and you were talking about skiing.
Yes.
And a brush with celebrity.
Yeah,
where you were like really close to celebrity yourself with the whole downhill skiing, but
I don't know about that.
I mean, from the way you made it sound, like you and this other person were like off on this like downhill skiing.
Well, we
competition
were, but I was here and she was here and she was 11, so
yeah. So I never caught how old you were, but you wanna entertain us with your downhill skiing story?
Yeah, definitely. So I grew up. I did a whole lot of downhill skiing and racing. There was a system, they still do it these days, called NASTAR, and all of a sudden one year I was like one of the top nationally ranked NASTAR skiers, and I didn't even know that I was all that good at it. But then there was a team at the hill that I grew up skiing at, which was named Buck Hill. And it was a Central U.S. ski team. They called it CUSA, C-U-S-S-A, Central U.S. Ski Association. And these USSA teams were essentially feeder teams up into sort of the U.S. ski team program. So just about every big Olympic skier you see from the States comes through the USSA program. And I had started on this team, and I was in like the top quarter of the kids on the team. So I wasn't.
This is while you were in Minnesota?
Yeah. So I would have been. It was between when I was about 12 and 17 is when I raced USSA.
I don't think of
And
like downhill skiing and mountains and things
yeah,
like that when I think
and
of
so
Minnesota, though.
Minnesota is very cold, and we get a lot of very warm days that come through in between the cold days. And Buck Hill, or Buck Bump, as many of us like to call it, it's only about 250 vertical feet, so it's very
Oh
small,
wow.
but it
Okay.
is steep and it is icy.
Oh,
And so rather than doing like downhill or super G, which are the big, fast, long turn races, we focused on slalom, which is the real quick
oh
back and
yeah.
forth. They never show it in the Olympics in the States. They're always showing the downhill, but never the slalom. It turns out that Buck Hill, back at least when I was skiing there, I think it's changed since then. They had more U.S. Olympic skiers come out of Buck Hill than any other ski area
Really?
in the U.S.
Wow.
Because of how steep and icy it is. And we had this legendary coach who's now in like the skiing Hall of Fame and all that kind of stuff, named Eric Seiler. He was a Austrian who had gotten a gold medal in skiing back in like the 50s or something like that. And he'd come to the States and he was going to teach skiing. And I mean, he basically like cracked the whip, and we all had to do, all these crazy workouts and stuff. So Lindsay, and this is Lindsay Vaughn, by the way. She was Lindsay Kildow at the time, and I got invited up, and we weren't invited. It was people from the team were invited, and we were the only two who went. So
Oh,
it
okay.
wasn't like
Gotcha.
I was personally invited, but we were the only two who went up there. There was this big ski meet that was up in Thunder Bay, which is just north of Minnesota. And we went up there, and because it was the only two of us, we would cheer each other on through the course. And in her first slalom run at like 11 years old. Now this race was, kids from 5 years old to college age that were, and it kind of spanned the gamut. And you were racing within your age group, but there was also like an overall winner for the men and for the women, basically. In her first run down, Lindsay beat every woman there up through the college girls, right? And in her second run, about 2 or 3 gates in, I'll never forget it, I was standing there cheering for her. She caught a tip on the gate, ski pops off, and on one ski, she goes down and sets a time that the two combined times would have given her the win. However, because her ski tip went to the inside of the gate, she was disqualified. But they just let the timer keep going because everyone's like, "Holy cow! This girl's like on one ski, and what is she doing? This is absolutely insane." The woman who won it, who was a college age girl, called Lindsay up and like gave her medal and was like, "That was the most incredible thing I've ever seen. you
That's amazing.
you deserve this more than I do." But I always say that was the moment. I had the Olympic aspirations. I mean, looking back on it now, it was like, a 16-year-old, 17-year-old kid's Olympic aspirations. I was good, but I was never that good. Well, this was the realization. I watched her do that, and I said to myself, I'm a good skier. I don't have whatever that is. It was just one of those like jaw-dropping moments, and that was the point which I kind of said, yeah, I'll keep skiing, and I love skiing, but I
Right.
don't think the Olympics are ever going to
Yeah.
be in the books for me.
I
So
did a tiny bit of downhill skiing in Ontario, and then when I moved to Ottawa, we went out to Montreal, and we went to a big mountain out there, and it was the coldest day of the year. It was -53 or -50
ooh,
something with a wind chill at the very top of
yep,
the mountain.
yep,
So it was starting to ice over, and the first run down, everybody's got frostbite on their face, from
yep,
going down the
yep.
hill, and towards like the latter part of the afternoon, we decided we were going to go down the north facing side of the mountain instead of the south facing side where all the sun was. So it
Yep.
was even colder.
Yep.
But
Wise
it's also,
decisions.
yeah, right. And it was also where the moguls were. And they're
Okay.
like, yeah, let's do moguls. And I'd never done moguls before. And I went down like one or two, and I'm like, nope,
Nope.
like noped
Nope.
out of that one, like went down the side. But it really tired up my legs, like trying to do
Oh
the
yeah.
bouncing kind of thing.
Yep.
And so when we went back to the south facing side, the sun was starting to go down, and so it was starting to get cold again, and starting to kind of ice over. and I ended up having a really bad ski accident, tore my MCL really bad,
Ooh.
and I haven't been skiing since. That was '99, so I've been
Yeah,
going
that would
23 years now
kind
without
of
it.
turn you off to it, I would say. Well, speaking of skiing, one of the things we like to do in the winter on my stream are skiing streams.
Oh, fun.
So built a well, it's right here. It's all plugged in, so I can. It's a Raspberry Pi in a box that has a battery on it, and take that with me, and
Right,
have a live feed from my GoPro that
that's right.
goes over my
Remember you
iPhone back to my streaming
remember you
PC.
chatting about this on your stream a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, and we I wrote like a little app for my phone in Swift that gathers all of my telemetry data and stuff and puts it up on the screen so you can see the
Oh,
speed
sweet.
and the altitude and all that kind of stuff. And so we've been working on that off and on during the streams, and it's a whole lot of fun. And I've got a member of my community that's letting me borrow a piece of equipment that should, knock on wood, allow me to do this when I go out skiing in the mountains. So
Sounds
we
great.
might have some really fun ski streams, high up on the mountain in Breckenridge and Big Sky, doing like the shoots and all the crazy kind of stuff, because that's the kind of stuff I like to do. So so
You
it
mean
should
you
be
mean
fun.
Breckenridge in Colorado?
Oh yeah, yep,
Dude, I'm like an hour and a half from Breckenridge. If you make it
awesome.
out
So,
here,
so
let me
I've got a
know.
cousin who lives in Dillon, so
Okay.
I go out there and she skis. She's a really good skier, so I go out and I stay with her, work from her place,
Yeah.
during the day and or in the evenings and in the mornings, and we go out skiing during the day. I've
Well,
got an Epic
I'm
season
awful at
pass that just came in the mail, so I'm gonna try to make
nice.
a
Well,
whole bunch of trips out there
I'm
this
awful
year.
at skiing, but I'd love to hang out and grab a bite or something. Yeah,
Absolutely.
Breckenridge is really great for sure. We had a really good question from Dota 2 in chat,
Yes.
asking for algorithm questions. How much do you think they do or don't improve your coding skill? That's a good question. What are your thoughts on like practicing those leetcode style things? Do they make you a better programmer?
I think they can. I think it depends on the algorithms. I don't think any particular algorithm is going to make you a better programmer, and I would, my thought is that it's one of these curves that when you first start doing them, I think you definitely do learn skills, learn ways of thinking and breaking down problems if you haven't had to break down problems like that. But it quickly peters out, right? It quickly, I mean, so many of these problems, while the algorithms end up being quite different, the basic approaches to them almost get, sort of canned to some extent. Like you do the same kind of approach every time, sort of checklist. And I don't know, I've never run into an issue where I've had to reverse a linked list in my day-to-day programming career,
Right.
or find the last 10 digits of non-zero digits of a trillion factorial, like that. It's
Right.
just never come up.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
I mean,
So
I feel the same way. I mean, I tell people on the stream all the time, I've done recursion twice in production my entire career. And I've made one prefix tree, or like a trie, where it's like, each node has multiple nodes kind of thing.
yep.
I did that exactly once, and it was to do a bunch of address comparisons. I was doing some freelance work for Toyota. And they had these big giant lists of people that own Toyotas, and they had multiple lists, and they wanted to kind of merge them into one list and deduplicate it at the same time.
Okay.
And sometimes it'd be like a husband and wife would both register, so they'd have different email addresses, but their street address was the same. And so we had to kind of go through and like normalize the street address. Like if it was 123 North Main Street Southwest, like take off the north, take off the southwest, see if that matches with
Yep.
the make and model of the car, and if it did, make a presumption that it's the same account kind of thing, or the same vehicle. But yeah, when I'm kind of in the same feeling, like to some degree they make you a better programmer, and they definitely get you thinking about problem solving. Like when you hear a problem, how do I break this down into pieces, and then how do I
Yep.
start solving those pieces?
Yep.
But beyond that, like, I don't know that I've ever built a depth first search in real life, like in production. Like I said, I've done recursion twice, like breadth first search. No, I mean, I've done a bunch of stuff with arrays and matrices and things like that because of the nature of the work that I've done. But most of the leetcode style problems aren't really helpful for day-to-day work, and that's why I grief on it so much on my channel around like these really aren't going to help you do the day job. And so why do companies put such an emphasis on it? I can kind of see it for the big FANG companies. Like they want the best of the best, and they want people
Yeah.
that can hear something and quickly break it down. But I mean, they're really catering to the people that have the time and the privilege of sitting down and studying LeetCode for months and months,
Exactly.
grinding
You can
on
get
it.
very good at doing LeetCode,
Right.
and then at the end of it, you're very good at doing LeetCode.
Right. Yeah, but you know, how good are you at actually like scaling things and building things? Like you're still
Yep.
just writing the same code that I'm writing at this, you know, startup or wherever I'm working. I'm at Postman now, where I'm not even really writing code other than, you know, testing out APIs. Um, like like I don't think long term, I don't think it makes you a better programmer. It makes you a better problem solver, like to hear something initially and break it down. But
Yep.
beyond that, I don't know that it really makes you a better programmer.
I fully agree.
Yeah. Interesting. Cool. Thanks for your take on that. I'm gonna clip that one out and
Okay.
throw that on YouTube later on. Like, let's see. We missed anything else in chat? You know, it says their name's probably on the Toyota list. I mean, maybe.
Yeah.
I think I found my wife's name on the list because she owned a used Toyota, and they were even tracking like Toyota owners as well. Yeah, good times. So I have a very important question to ask.
Okay.
Hey Hantu, thank you for the follow. Very important question to ask. So you do all this work in OBS with all the overlays and so
Yep.
on. Am I actually looking at the chalkboard behind you, or is that the green screen behind you?
You are absolutely looking
Oh,
at.
wow! I'm honored. I got real chalk on the chalkboard.
You did get real
What?
talk.
I got real chalk on the chalkboard. Oh, that's fantastic. I remember asking Mark about that on his stream one time, and he actually like rolled up the green screen and like there's the actual chalkboard right behind, exact same shade of yellow paint. And I'm like, wow, that was like really, that's amazing.
Yep. Nope. That is the real one.
How funny.
The green screen folds up. We got a little bulkhead above me, and it folds
Yeah.
up right behind it. So
That's awesome. Yeah, I've got girders up above me, and I've got one that I can pull down. I don't use it on the stream. I initially thought I was going to use it on the stream, and then I started buying the nano leaf panels. I'm like, oh, those look way better than a green screen.
yep. Yep.
My oldest is doing some film production class at school right now, and might get into a little bit of green screening. I'm like, well, I got a green screen. You're welcome to use it, and cameras and lights and all that stuff. So.
And here, my green screen, I'm thinking is a little too narrow, so I've literally been shopping around for like 10-foot wide vinyl rolls of green screen material, and then trying to make a motorized deal to make it go up and down.
Yeah,
the actual green screen material is not that expensive. Shipping it is a small fortune because they got to ship it in a 10-foot long tube.
Right.
They can't hold it. So
well, I'm going to let everybody peek behind the proverbial curtain here for a moment. And the reason that I was curious about this, let me see if I can extend this window. So on the stream, I see a shadow at the bottom of the door that we normally don't see the shadow when the clones are coming through the door, and so that had me wondering, like, am I actually looking at the green screen or am I looking at the real thing here? So that's too funny. Peek behind the magic. So I mean, I gotta ask. How patient is your family that you were able to come up with all these characters and just be like, hey, just ignore me for the next several hours or days while I record all these strange outfits and characters and so on for your stream?
They love it. They love it. When I dress up as well, no, I don't. When Captain Jack the pirate comes out of the cloning room, the mini Singularity is absolutely thrilled to see him.
That's great.
I always joke. Ryan just posted 2 of the emotes there. There's Captain Jack, and then there's Detective Jack.
Detective Jack,
who
has
the
mean one.
The epic stash.
That was a real mustache too, right?
It is an absolutely real mustache. I mean, it's crazy when they get cloned. They seem to take on whatever facial hair I had at the time. And all winter last winter, I grew out my beard.
Okay.
And so I was joking around right around the cloning time. In the bathroom shaving the beard off, and I came out with that mustache, and Mrs. Singularity was literally rolling on the floor laughing with that mustache. And I was like, okay, I gotta go start this one up in the cloning bin back there, so so we can make that happen.
How long does it take you to come up with like the little sayings and stuff, or do you like is any of that ad-libbed when you come out? Or? Yeah.
It takes some time. The Detective Jax ones were tough because he's all based off of I don't know if you remember a band called the Beastie Boys.
Oh yeah.
They had a video for their song Sabotage, which were all
Okay.
these like street detectives, you know, on the case kind of stuff, and they had the handlebar mustaches and all that stuff. So he's kind of modeled off of my love of the Beastie Boys, because the Beastie Boys were one of my favorite bands growing
Yeah.
up. I still listen to tons and tons of Beastie Boy music when I'm skiing.
That's awesome.
It takes me back to being in like high school and college. And so I decided that I wanted every one of Detective Jack's his encounters with the stream to end with a verse from the song Sabotage, but sort of tweaked to be about programming or chat backseating or whatever, which some people picked up on. It was kind of fun to see people in chat pick up on that. So.
What other sorts of characters are in the plans or in the works? Do you have other clones?
There's a lot.
brewing?
Believe it or not, I still fit into and I still have my ski racing speed suit. From back when I was racing. So Ski Racer is definitely going to be making an appearance here.
Gonna make them like a programmer kind of persona or something?
No, I think he's just gonna always be on his way out to the slopes. He'll be more of a walk by kind of a character. There's Mrs. Singularity is trying to convince me. She was like, you know, with this whole cheering thing, when people cheer these bits, you should do different prices for different cheer reactions, and you know, for whatever. She was like, yeah, maybe for 100 bits you come out with a beer in your hand and it's a cheer, and maybe for like, you know, 5,000 bits you come out in a cheerleader's outfit with pom-poms. So,
I think that one maybe needs to be a little more than that, but
yes, I thought she was pricing it a little low as well, but she said she'd like to see it.
10,000 bits for a keg stand. There we go. Heisenball's got the right idea there.
Yes. So yeah, there's definitely ideas for clones. I'm always trying to think of stuff. The kids' costume bin is always giving ideas for what to do next. So
great. Well, I have a channel point redemption that nobody's actually redeemed, but I'll give you a preview.
Okay.
So this is a Star Wars helmet, and it's a clone trooper helmet. And if you're familiar with Loyal Moses, he runs a 3D printing channel here on Twitch, and he had like a Patreon where you could do a helmet tier, and if you pay into that, he would send you helmets that he would 3D print. And he had a designer go through and turn this clone trooper helmet into a Hello Kitty helmet. And he actually 3D printed a whole bunch of them in this bright pink with a red bow. And I'm like, I don't want a pink helmet. I'm like, can you do me like a dark blue or something, and like keep the red bow, but like do it in dark blue.
Yep.
And so I have a Hello Kitty clone trooper helmet.
Oh, very nice. Very, very nice.
Yep.
So it fits pretty well.
It does bonk on the nose a little bit, but yeah.
You need to put like a voice changer or something in it.
Yeah, well now that I've got the streamer bot up and running, I might play around with voice mod. That if somebody redeems this, I'll put it on and do the voice mod and do like similar to what Amish Ace does, where he does like the Mandalorian type of voice. But yeah, it's fantastic. It's a little heavy, but it's a fun little helmet. And of course, I'm big into the Legos and the 3D printed dragons, stuff like that. Just make cat noises. Yeah, I could just meow at people. I'm sure there's a market for that on Twitch for sure. They got everything else with ASMRs and hot tub.
Or you got to make the thought translation collar for the dog.
Ooh,
I mean, I can see if I've got an extra one I could send you. So.
Oh, I've got plenty of IoT stuff with blinky LEDs and stuff. I'm sure Riker would be game for that. I don't think he would be patient enough to just sit in a chair and like videotape him just sitting staring at me like you do with Ross codes. But
I tried with Ollie,
Yeah.
It did not go well.
Oh no.
He actually jumped off he's an 80-pound German short hair pointer, like strong as a moose, this dog. And he jumped like onto the desk, but halfway on and the chair slid out.
Oh no.
And he started doing this
Yeah.
thing. I mean, I caught my monitor as it almost went off the desk.
Oh,
It's like,
yeah, that's not
that
good.
one's not going to work too well.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it'd be funny. Yeah, I'm a big fan of 3D printing. I've got a fleet of them over here. I'm in the process now of starting to build one. I just got some of the last few parts to actually build out a 3D printer.
very nice.
So and that'll be big enough to print like helmets and cosplay armor, stuff like that.
Yeah, I picked up a Crealty, what is it, a Ender 3 Pro?
Yeah. Yep.
And from a friend of a friend, and he'd upgraded the heck out of it, but then he bought a Prusa or something like that, and I think I finally got it printing.
Cool.
When I have time, I've been working on it, and of course, I'm not just going to start with it. I'm going to do Octoprint and like all that stuff. So
yeah, you gotta go all in on it. Yeah, for sure. No, I mean that'll be good for your little ski rig that you want to make. You can like custom make a little shell and whatever, and like
exactly. Well,
exactly how you want to form it together.
We did make a little thing with an ESP32 and a stepper motor, a little stepper motor.
Okay.
That I was going to do these canoeing streams this summer, and it turned out that where I was going, I thought I had really good mobile coverage, but I didn't, so it didn't work out. But we wrote all the software and we put all the parts together for a chat controllable camera pan. Wow. And I bet I could like mount that to my shoulder when I'm skiing, and then chat could actually
control the camera
as I'm making my way down the mountain. So that might be kind of fun. That
would be kind of neat. It'd be interesting to get into some sort of like almost a computer vision of like while you're going down the slope, have it figure out like, that's that direction is where the bottom of the slope is, and so as you turn, it would turn to like always like, so no matter which way you're facing going down the hill, like it's always going to look at the bottom of the hill.
So here's the thing about the type of skiing I do. I actually usually mount the camera to my chest, and you're always supposed to be pointing your chest down the fall line. Right. So I typically do that just by nature. So it's usually actually and these GoPros have amazing image stabilization, so they're just like rock solid down the hill.
Yeah.
So.
Rusty Maniac says Chad would just be telling everybody like, look at your butt.
Yeah, probably. Although I'm trying to figure out a way. I wanted to maybe get a clone on skis that could be summoned in to like ski across in front of me or something like that, which would be kind of fun.
Yeah. Oh, all kinds of fun. Yep. Very cool. So this whole like construction app that you've built, just to kind of bring it back to code for a minute, you've spent 5 years building this thing out. You own all the rights to it. What would you say were some of the more practical takeaways? Like if you were to say, okay, well, I'm going to put that aside, or just get the license back to that company or something and just go work for someone else. What would you say are like some of the big skills? Like clearly you've had to learn Python, you've had to learn Django, you've learned a lot about, user interface design and things like that. What would you say are some of those sort of key high level skills? Maybe not like the programming language and things like that, but like what are some high level skills you think that you've kind of learned out of working on?
Well, I think working on a project of that scope, you have to look at your code in a different way, right? It's you have to be able to look at the smallest details, but you also have to see the big picture. And I think one of the things I really learned on writing this code is the importance of being able to shift your point of view, because you approach problem solving very differently when you're at the small scale than when you're at the large scale. And it's very different types of problems that need to be solved. And you can run into problems where one is impeding the other, and then trying to figure that out. I see why there are like literal architecture engineers in programming, and that is all they do, because it's really, really hard. It turns out that it's not an easy thing to do. The other thing I think I really learned going through this whole process is we as programmers, when we're putting together something that's going to be used out in the field, right? We actually need to in many cases, learn what goes on out in the field, right? I mean, I started off, I built sort of the first version of what a time card would look like, and my only experience with time cards was when I was doing fintech stuff, and we had like the ADP or whatever that software is, and you'd like type in your start time and you'd type in your end time and you'd click submit, and it was in like a little table and you could see everything. And I started putting that together, and one of the foremen looked at it and he's like, how the heck am I going to clock in on a job in Minnesota when I'm knee deep in freezing water and it's 35 degrees below zero? Like, this is just, we're not going to do it. You know, and it was this sudden realization that, wow, we really need to like think about how even just the interface is going to work with this. And now we've got a big button on the phone if they have to clock in and out, you know, outside of their truck with literally like with a mitten, they can tap the thing to get clocked in and out. And so a lot of like very human problems that you tend not to encounter during the development process, and you have to actually go out and seek those problems out to try to solve those things. I think the biggest lesson that I've learned that I'm now having to come to terms with is, I mean, I'm obviously one of these people that's kind of like well, as my wife would say, you think you can do everything, right? It's just a lot of us have those sorts of personalities. I mean, that's really what got me through a PhD program, through my postdocs, through starting up different companies. It's a personality trait. And it was this learning that, hey, you know, you can't do everything on your own. You're going to get to a point where you have, you know, 300,000 or 500,000 line code base, and that is literally just too much for anyone to handle. So you need help. You need to ask for help. It's not a weakness. And for me, I've never looked at it as, oh, I don't want to ask for help. It's always just been, I don't think to ask for help, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so I think now I'm sort of coming to those terms where I'm like, wow, this code has gotten really, really complex. I do have it all in my mind, but if I want to continue doing this and I want to keep my sanity, I need to be able to hire help on. It's not an option. Otherwise, I am going to lose it. I am going to have a breakdown at some point if I try to do it all on my own. So
the interesting thing, I actually had a question kind of come up regularly on the stream of like, you know, should I just go get any job in tech in order to get a job in tech? And, you know, some people are like, well, if I go get that QA job, I'm going to get pigeonholed in QA. Or if I take a job in, you know, customer support, I'm going to get pigeonholed in that. I'm not going to be able to go get a coding job afterwards. And I always tell people like, no, like go get that job and then, you know, keep practicing your programming skills. And then when you are, you know, like keep looking for that developer job. And in that interview, what you want to do is tell them the story of like, no, I did that on purpose because now I'm better at testing the code. In that QA role, I've got more of this holistic, I know how all these things talk. Where as programmers, sometimes we get those blinders on and we work on just that little piece of the system, and that's all we know and that's all we understand. So my test passed, what do you mean it broke? It's like, well, it broke when we make all of these systems talk together. And so, you know, yourself having built out this whole, you know, app over 5 years, you've got that whole picture in your mind. So, you know, oh, if I change this field in this model, it's going to have this ripple effect across the system. And most people don't have that awareness.
But you also have to have the awareness that you may think that that's what that ripple is going to do, but there may be parts of that ripple that you have no idea about. I mean, that has been a common experience. You bring up testing. You know, you literally bring up testing, which you probably heard me talking about it a bit on my stream, because it has become an issue lately where, you know, again, being the sole developer on this project and only having so much time I can put into it, you know, the client wants this new feature that actually a big emergency came up and it absolutely needs to happen in the next, you know, 4 days. And where do you cut the corners? Well, it's not in the software, it's not in the user experience, it's in the tests.
The testing and documentation, absolutely.
It is. And I'm in a position right now where I started off very strong with my testing, but I didn't keep up to date with my tests, so many of my tests are stale and aren't testing the right thing, and I didn't keep that up. And B, there's a whole, probably 40% of my code base right now, probably some of the most important 40% of my code base that have little to no testing being done. And there is a business of 50 plus people that is literally run every day off this software. These are people's livelihoods. This is people's water to their house when a water main breaks and these employees get called out to fix this thing. There's a lot of pressure there, and I'm finding that because of my lack of testing at this point, which didn't seem like, it started with, oh well, I just won't write it this time and I'll come back to it. Narrator, he didn't come back to it, right? It's what happens. But I'm getting to that point now where I'm literally starting to lose sleep over it. There's anxiety there, and so again, I need to, if I'm going to scale this thing out, I'm going to need to, Ryan, you're bringing up Detective Jax there.
Well, it sounds like a good Hacktoberfest project. If people are looking for something to do, is your stuff open source at all?
It is not open source,
okay.
So unfortunately, so that makes it a little bit hard, and so it's one of those things that everyone talks about how important testing is, and I think as developers, regardless of where on the ladder we are, how narrow or broad our scope is, we have some of an exposure to that. But when you're literally the owner of the product and you are the one who's going to get the call at 2:00 in the morning, and then you're also the one who has to fix it, and you're the one who's potentially going to get sued if a business loses thousands of dollars out of it, suddenly it seems a lot more important than it did, when you weren't all those things. So that's definitely been a learning, a big learning piece for me throughout this project.
Sure.
So,
shout out to Techie Girl. Says Chrissy Codes kicked Techie Girl out of her stream and told Techie Girl to come over here. So thanks for hanging out with us. I've actually been that guy. Like I worked at a startup in Santa Monica where I was putting in like 90 hours a week for like a year and a half or more, almost 2 years. And we weren't doing software testing at all. Like, I mean, this is 2009, 2010. So software testing as a notion was pretty new to begin with. Like it had only been around the Java realm for a few years. And the type of coding that I was doing at the time, I was doing multi-threaded Perl, for data processing to analyze real-time ad traffic, figure out which ad to show on a website next. It was an ad tech company that I was at. And we had no testing. And so it was always this panic of like, if I push that code, is it going to break? Because if it breaks, now not only do I have to fix the bug and deal with the outage report and whatever, I've also got this giant backlog of log files that I've got to chew through and like queue up and replay. Meanwhile, we might be showing an ad more than we're supposed to, and now our customers are angry, and the people buying the ads are angry. It's like, and so I lost a lot of sleep, and I joke with people. Well, they think I'm joking, but I basically said, like, when I quit that job, like within a year, my hair turned gray. Like I was so stressed at that job all the time that within a year, like my hair was completely gray, because it does take a toll, and I think it's important to think about programming from the responsibility aspect of it to certainly the business side, because you don't want to get sued. But one of the very first streams that I did on the channel, like last, I want to say July, early August, was on mental health and how it affects us as programmers, and how we need to take care of our own mental health. And if there's things like anxiety coming up, it's like we need to address that. Like that's just as important as the tech debt, because if you have a breakdown and you can't work on that code and you can't fix that bug, then they're also kind of up a creek.
Absolutely.
Proverbial or otherwise, if there's flooding and plumbing problems going on.
Yes.
But it can be really problematic for sure. So I would say like prioritize you. Like it's important that
absolutely.
That you take care of that.
And that's another thing that it definitely, being a one-man team, early on, I would throw myself into it, and it got to the point that, Mrs. Singularity and the kids were like, you got to do what you got to do, but we're not seeing very much of you. And it was kind of a wake up call. It was like, at the time, mini singularity would have been 4 or 5. You don't get those years back, and they're not worth any kind of price in my world, right? And so I said that completely wrong. Missing them is not worth any kind of price in my world.
What you meant.
So it's one of those things where you really, I mean, this is more of sort of a life perspective that I have had, and I've been fortunate enough to have a spouse who shares very, very similar viewpoints on this. But it's really, really important to figure out what's important to you and build the things that you do around what's important to you. And that doesn't mean it has to be your typical family stuff. You could be a startup founder where the thing that is really important to you is your startup, and that's fantastic. But if you are someone who, time with your family is by far the most important thing to you, like I am, you don't want to compromise on that, because every little compromise you get further and further away from that, and it gets harder and harder to get it back. So be strong in your beliefs, and there you will find the people who share those beliefs. You will find the companies that will work with those beliefs. You can present your value in a way that you can make it work, and whoever's hiring you can make it work. But you need to be clear and upfront about it, and ask the right questions, and know what you're getting into.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, like you bring up a good point. Like it's important to find coworkers or businesses or clients, even in your case, where they understand that that's a balance that's important to you, and that's part of how you do what you do. The fact that you're writing the software and you own the software, and while it's not open source, you're very open about showing it on your stream.
Yeah.
Does your client have any sort of misgivings about like, oh, you're showing it, or anything like that?
No, nothing.
Cool.
Nothing. I mean, I of course I have a whole thing that I wrote when I decided I wanted to do this. I actually spent a weekend writing code that goes through the database. It takes every address in the database, and it ran. I have a databases of addresses in Minnesota that I was able to get for like $10 or something.
Oh, that's cool.
And so it literally like takes the city that job was in and picks a different random address for that job.
Cool. Neat.
And then there's a whole it was like a mock-up software that can mock up like fake company names. So you'll
like
notice when you're looking at the planner and stuff, when I bring it up on screen, it's almost all like, it almost sounds like law firms. It's like Schwartz, Smith and Frankie or whatever. Whereas in reality, that job was, the city of Edina, and it replaces all the names with random stuff. And then I have a list of names that I've used that track to the actual employees in the company, because I know all of their positions. That one I had put in place long before I even started streaming, because it was a very easy way for me to know if I was looking at production data or development data.
Yeah.
And the system's complex enough that I want to bring in regular production data, because I need to see, seeing only one job in the planner does not tell me if the planner is doing what it needs to do. And rather than writing things to fabricate all these jobs, I have a whole database of actual jobs, and I can just randomize the names and the addresses, without anything. So I think my client wouldn't be so happy if I was like broadcasting that they were doing this job for this person. And not that anyone on Twitch is looking for that, but it's all anonymized and randomized. So
is that something that you run every time before you actually go live and stream, or this is just a separate database that you've done this once and that's just what you use?
No, I've actually got a script I've written that goes and grabs the current production database, pulls it in, and then runs the anonymization routine on it. So it's a
that's pretty cool.
Dev grab script, I guess.
Yeah.
And I like I said, I still use it even when I'm not streaming, because like I said, I know that I'm not acting on production because the names are all different.
So I think anybody who's been in the industry for more than a couple of years will have had at least one production level incident. Do any come to mind for you, or you actually did something on production that you wish you hadn't?
I do, and I can tell a great story about it, but I need to just mute myself
Yeah, no
for
worries.
one moment here, real quick. Hold
Not a
on just
problem.
a second.
Not a problem at all. There's a funny saying for sure that if you don't have a production outage named after you, are you even a dev?
But it was a real quick one. It was a can I feed the dogs and take them to bed? And I was like, yeah,
Oh, yeah.
go right ahead.
No worries. No worries.
So my big production thing was actually the day that we rolled out the software, the day that the thing went live. And it was, knock on wood, I mean, I'm probably going to totally like screw myself up here by saying
You're gonna jinx
the
it now.
only thing that we've done that was like a real big issue. Um, we had tested the heck out of this thing, right? I had a dev server. We had actually put like a couple crews we picked a week or two before to double enter all their stuff in. The old system that I had written, there was no way to. You couldn't map the old data to the new data format. You didn't have enough information to do that mapping, so I couldn't pull like all their old data into the database and convert it to what we needed. So we had to kind of start fresh. So they didn't want to be like entering in everything twice for like a month to test the thing. They wanted to be sure things were going to run okay. But they said, well, we'll do 2 crews. We'll have 2 crews enter the stuff in. So I fire up the dev database. I push the app to their iPads and their phones. And for 2 weeks, for a week, they all enter the stuff in, and it goes great. And it works brilliantly. And so Monday, January 13th, 2021. No, 2020. I distinctly remember the date. We went live. And that night, the night before, I put everything up, and on the front screen of the thing, there's like a panel where you can see all of the employees in the company and whether they're clocked in or not. And I'm like, okay, so we're gonna see if people go clocked in. I get up at like 6 o'clock in the morning, and I start seeing the green lights go on as people are clocking in. And I'm like, okay, this is fantastic. This is fantastic. About a half hour later, I get a call from one of the truck drivers saying I'm trying to move this piece of equipment and it keeps disappearing off my screen. And I'm like, well, that's weird. And I go in, and like the whole trucking thing seems to start, like it'll lock up and then it'll sort of work a little. I'm like, okay, this is really, really weird behavior. And I realize at this point that I have no idea to see what they're seeing in the field. Like, there's no way to see it. And then I start getting calls where half the crew was able to clock in, but the other half of the crew was not able to clock in. And things start to, I mean, it starts looking really cascading. I mean, it's not looking good. And by now it's maybe like 9 o'clock in the morning. And I'm starting to panic. I'm starting to get like really, really freaked out. And I'm like, okay, do I just pull the plug right now and say, go back to the old system? Because the old system's running, and then I'm going to try to do this, and we'll start it again next week. And this launch had been delayed so many times that I was like, because it was a really hard software to get the thing to do even the first deployment of it, right? So I'm like, no, I'm gonna figure this out. And I said, okay, so the first thing I need to do is I need to be able to get the view of a given employee. And so we've got a little eyeball that's up in the corner where I can click it, and then I can literally, because I've got the full-on admin rights, I can switch to any employee and see exactly what they would see.
Oh, sweet.
And I switched to an employee. I wrote this thing. It was by lunchtime. I got it going by lunchtime. It's some of the code I'm most proud of because I was able to put it together so quickly. It seems like it would be something that would take forever. I don't know how good it is. I've never touched it since. It's probably one of those places that's just waiting to explode the whole thing.
Right.
But I log in, and on my Mac, it's working fine, and there's no problem whatsoever. And I'm like, what the heck is going on here? So then I fire it up on my phone, and the thing, when I try to do the exact same thing on the phone, and this is running the exact same JavaScript code, it's crashing when stuff is hitting the database. And I'm like, Actually, it was when it was coming back from the database, and I'm like, what is going on here? So I start searching through, and it was probably about 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
Wow.
When I come across a post in like one of the Apple tech, one of the Apple boards on their like dev boards or whatever, where it turns out there's like 6 or 7 different ways that ISO 1806 or whatever the date standard is, there's like 6 different ways you can represent one of these dates. Like sometimes you do a Z with like the 0500, whatever.
Time zone offsets, and
Yes. Apple implemented all of them in Safari, but only 5 of the 6 of them in WebView inside of an app.
Oh no.
Which is what the darn app was using.
Oh.
The reason it didn't happen with the dev server is when I fired up the production server, there was one little setting where it said, what time zone are you in? And I filled it in with America, Chicago. And so all the dates started going out time zone stamped rather than UTC to the device.
Oh, no.
And they were using that one of 6 formats
that
was breaking the thing down.
Oh, no.
And it had cascaded through because of the problems. It had cascaded through, and we had bad data all through the database and everything, because 50 employees logging in, trying to clock things in on the job. I finally went to bed at 4:30 in the morning. I remember looking at my phone at about 10 o'clock at night that night, and I had 96 phone calls logged on my phone. I fell asleep 4 o'clock in the morning. I told the fellow who was my main contact there, I was like, worst case scenario, I've got the data here from today. I can manually enter it into your old system. If it's not working tomorrow morning, we're gonna go back to the old system for a week. It's this problem with the Apple thing, whatever. And there was one other little problem with trucking that I figured out along the way too.
Wow.
Go to sleep. I said, I'm going to be getting up at like 9. I need to get a few hours of sleep here, right? I get up at 9, green lights all the way down. That day, we had like 4 little bugs come up that I kind of fixed like in line while it was going. The next day, we only had 2 bugs. And I mean, we still get bugs in the thing. But the actual launch was one of the most harrowing, it was like... And it wasn't something you would have even necessarily caught in... You could have written all the tests in the world. And, I was even developing in containers. So I was like, okay, my production is exactly like my development environment. Why is there this sudden change? It was that one stupid time zone setting and the fact that Apple didn't implement one of those ISO standards.
Funny.
So,
wow.
Yeah, I definitely was a one-on paper hanger that day.
That one's better than mine. I once dropped 150 million rows of production data.
Oh, well, that's a good one.
But thankfully, we have this amazing lady who was our DBA, and not only was she making regular snapshots of the data,
okay,
she also tested that the backups actually worked, and she could recover them.
Yep.
Like I've heard so many stories over the years of like, oh yeah, we were making backups, but nobody ever bothered to test that the backups actually worked. And when we tried to restore it, turns out the backups were all garbage. She actually did. She tested all this stuff. She actually wrote a book on MySQL, and
nice.
So if I ever run into her, I'm going to get her to autograph the book for me. But I have this thing where if any of my friends or coworkers write a book, I buy a copy, and then the next time I see them, I get them to sign it for me.
Yep, absolutely.
And so she wrote a book. I don't think that story's in the book. At least
no.
she never told me if it was in the book, but she tested the backups, and we had everything back up and running, within probably an hour or two. And during that whole like outage sort of meeting afterwards of like, what happened, we do this thing called 5 whys of like, why did that happen, why did that happen, what did we, why did that happen, so until you really get down to the root cause. And like, I'm just going to save everybody all the time and just say like, we should probably yank production database access from like developers on the team, because I thought I was logged into a staging database when I was clearing out this old data, because we we were doing some testing on DynamoDB on AWS, and this is back in 2015, and it was still pretty spendy. I mean, it's always been spendy, but it was extra spendy back then.
Yep.
And so we were trying to do some load testing. So I had some Python scripts that was just dumping like, these hundreds of millions of rows of just junk garbage data. I think we were using Faker at the time to like, come up with fake email addresses.
Yep.
And so once we did the load testing, we had to go in and we had to clear it all out. And I thought I was logged into the staging system when I'm like drop table or whatever. And I'm like, this is taking a really long time. Like I thought I only put like a couple of million rows in there. Like, why is this taking such a long time? And then I looked at the prompt and realized like, oh no, I'm on production. Like, oh no. And
so I almost ran the anonymization script once on production. I was in the wrong terminal window, which would have changed all their addresses and like changed all their job names and their employee names. I caught it right before I did it.
Your work is being done today by Homer Simpson.
Yes, yes. You were talking about like using, making sure your backups can be restored. And one of the projects I'm actually working on right now is changing my dev environment so that the name of my database is not clog dev, but is clog prod, because the database name doesn't really matter. And what I plan on doing in the next couple weeks here, we take 15-minute snapshot backups, then hourly, then daily for 7 days, then weekly for a month, and then we have monthlies going back to the beginning. What I plan on doing is changing my script rather than doing my Django out. I have a script that goes in and causes a Django dump to happen on the prod and then transfers the file back to me, and then I import it on my development side. What I'm going to end up doing is going and just getting the latest backup and then deploying it to my system. So that way, every day when I develop, I'm inherently testing that we're able to deploy the backups.
Cool. Sethi asked a question in chat. Could use some advice. You have an offer. Yeah, you got an offer. Congratulations. So you're based in Winnipeg, and the offer is with a company in Nova Scotia. Base salary $45K, bonus up to $20K. I've tried to push the base to $50, but no success. I mean, first of all, congratulations on getting the offer. I know you've been working a really long time at working on that offer, so congratulations. That's fantastic. The fact that they're in Nova Scotia, hopefully they're going to let you work remote and you're not going to have to relocate. But if you do, Nova Scotia is a lovely area of the country. As far as trying to negotiate, I typically tell people you got to negotiate that base salary, because that base salary is what they're going to base every other raise, and a lot of your bonus is going to be based off of that. Follow up, I'm not 100% convinced regarding the move from Winnipeg. The team is in R&D, it's a software development role. Okay. So yeah, I mean, I get it. If they want you to relocate and you're having concern about that, I get that. For a first job, yeah, the salary is a little bit low. The fact that the bonus is there shows that they're willing to invest back in the staff. What catches my eye is the up to $20K per year. And I've certainly worked at companies where the bonus structure is not always based on your performance metrics, but how does the team do? How did the organization do? And a lot of that's out of your control. And so while it can be beneficial if the whole organization rallies and does something really great, it's really out of your control. If the company doesn't do well, it's out of your control, and now you're not getting a bonus because some slacker on your team didn't pull their weight. So that would be one thing I would probably want to try to get a little more information from the team about like how that bonus structure is actually set up, and whether it's your own performance metrics or if there's like a combination of 50% of that bonus is your performance, 25% is the team, and the other 25 is the overall organization, like some kind of definite split on that. I would try to get that in writing, like what is that actual split? How does that actually happen? Because you want that bonus to be based on things that you can control as much as possible, and less about the external factors that might impact what's going on. And Techie Girl says in chat too, the salary is quite low for Canada. Consider the bonus a bonus. Yep, don't count on it being there. Absolutely. I absolutely agree with that. they better be paying for the relocation for sure. I got the bonus part correct. 70% is based on production of factory output. The company is on parts cuttings. Okay. So if I remember right, Sethi is trying to build out automation for like industrial systems and things like that. So in that scenario, just to kind of follow up with Techie Girl's comment, the salary seems a little bit low. There will, like, it's not like a pure tech company, and sometimes these non-tech companies that know they need to hire technical people, they don't understand that our skills are actually worth a lot more at other companies. For Sethi though, if I remember right, this is going to be your first tech job. The part of me wants to say, like, take the job, get the experience, and then literally go get any other job where you're gonna like double that salary or more. But it's really it's going to depend a little bit on some factors around you want to move, because now you're out in Nova Scotia, which, you know, it is a nice area of the country, but to my knowledge, there's not a lot of other tech companies out in that area. You'd probably have to move back to Quebec or Ontario to get into more tech firms, unless you really like it there and you want to work remote or something like that. You're probably going to relocate again. They will pay relocation up to a certain amount, usually whatever's taxable. Up to $1,000 isn't very much for relocation expense, though. You generally want them to help offset rent as well as the actual expense of moving. In Canada, having been there myself, I know that companies can get a tax break, but you can also file on your own taxes, your own private taxes. If you move closer to a job in order to take a job and it's over a certain amount of distance, that you can claim the distance and a bunch of the moving expenses yourself. So even if the company's not reimbursing all of that, you can still make a tax claim on your taxes next spring, but you got to wait till next spring for that to happen. So that's the other downside, is you're putting money up front and you're going to get a refund on that later when you file your taxes at the end of April next year. But yeah, I mean, the salary is a little bit low. Friends of mine just moved to Nova Scotia and it cost them nearly $10,000. Yeah. Yeah, I would say, so Sethi says in chat, just for the sake of experience, because I don't have any other offers lined up. I mean, one thing is you've got that offer. So any other company that you are talking to, you could say, hey, I have an offer in hand. Those 3 words, offer in hand, will move mountains on other companies. And they know that, you know, because you've got an offer, you're able to get through an interview process and so on. They're more likely to move a little bit quicker. Not always. Sometimes you will run the risk if you call a company that you're already interviewing with and say, hey, I have an offer. They're like, all right, bye, take your offer. Good luck. But a lot of times if a company sees potential in you, they will hurry up their own interview process in order to get you through. It's not that they're going to like stop all the interviews and say, okay, well, fine, we'll give you an offer right now. They may still want to go through their interview process, but they may hurry it up a little bit based on the fact that you have an offer. I have told other people in private conversations that you can still talk to other companies, even if you decide not to take this offer. You've got kind of a window of time where you can still use that to your advantage, even if you don't take the offer, where you can say, yeah, I was given an offer by this other company, but they want me to relocate to Nova Scotia, and I'm not really sure if I want to do that. You know, you don't want to make it sound like you've already declined, but you can still use the language where you say, I've been given an offer. You don't have to tell them that you declined the offer and it's like no longer valid. And you could still make it sound like that offer is still open. And just say, like, I'm trying to make a decision whether I want to relocate to Nova Scotia or not. So you can tell kind of a little white lie around, you know, is the offer actually valid or not, in order to hurry up other companies. If you're not interviewing anywhere else, though, then you're going to be a little bit stuck there. But 50K is pretty low. Like, even 50K is pretty low. My first job out of college, I was making like 30K, but that was 26 years ago. My last job in Canada, even with only like 4 years experience, I think I was making close to 70K. And that was like late 90s. So a lot has changed. I think, you know, even as a new grad, new in the industry, I think you could be getting a lot more than 40K or 45K. I think you could make a lot more than that. Plus the relocation, I think $1,000 is not going to be nearly enough. But like I said, a lot of those relocation expenses you will be able to get back on your taxes. Yeah, 50K is pretty low for software development. Yeah, I agree. So yeah, Sethi, I don't know how much that advice is going to help, but it might, if anything else, give you some other things that you can talk about. And you're welcome to contact me offline too. I can help you sort of talk about the, the wording and things like that on if you want to use that offer to your advantage while speaking to other companies. I'm happy to help you out on that. Techie Girl and Wolf, really appreciate you offering some feedback and advice in chat as well. Jenin, first time chat, good to see you. Thanks for dropping by. Should I apply to roles I know I have no chance of getting? How do you know? How do you know you have no chance of getting it? You don't know unless you apply and then they tell you no. I mean, if they're asking for like 5-10 years experience and you don't have any experience, then that's a pretty good chance they'll say no, but not always. Some companies will look at the projects that you made and kind of the potential that you have. And there's a possibility that they may say, like, we were hoping to hire a senior, but you've impressed us with what you've built and communication, things like that. Sometimes they'll open a junior role, but it's rare. But I would say if they're looking for like 2 or 3 years experience and you don't have any, I would apply for the job anyway. Let them level you up. Don't level yourself as far as what you know and what you don't know. That's their job as the interviewer, is to figure out what you know and the depth of what you know. Let them figure that out as part of the interview process. They'll be able to tell some of that from your resume and the quality of your projects and so on. But I always tell people, like, just go for it. Just chase the dream. You don't know until they actually get through the interview process and then tell you no. But it might surprise you. You might be in a better position than you think you are. A lot of times, if you're like me, you're kind of like, you kind of got the negative thoughts going through your mind and imposter syndrome and stuff anyway. So yeah, I would say don't hold yourself back. Don't let that hold you back. Just go ahead and apply for that job. Mark, any advice to like newcomers to tech, as far as like skills or what kinds of projects they could build, like what might sort of stand out to?
I mean, so for me, I've interviewed a couple people coming in. There were some chances where I had a little bit of funding where I could get someone in for like a summer job kind of a deal. And I was always, and granted, I may not be like any other hiring manager out there because I'm, I have a experience of one here.
Yeah.
But I was always more interested in, how someone thought about problems, how someone thought about programming, right? I can always teach you the language. I can't teach you well, I could, but it takes me a lot longer to teach you to think like a programmer. And maybe that's what some of these tech companies doing these leetcode interviews are trying to figure out. I don't think that's a good metric to determine that. But my goal was always to try to figure out, how does this person think about problem solving and programs and sort of that general idea. And just to echo what you said, I mean, I always go back on it. It's one of those things that I remember from when I was a kid. My dad would always, I'd be working on something and I'd be getting really frustrated and I'd be like, oh, I'm just going to give up, kind of a deal. And my dad was one of those people that did not like when people gave up. And I can distinctly remember him walking into my room one day, and he had this bifocals down on his nose like this. And he said, Mark, if you don't pull the arrow back or the bow back all the way, you'll never know how far your arrow can fly. And that was like this phrase that always stuck with me about pulling that bow back all the way, giving it a shot. And even if you don't hit the target, it's worth the try. So
and now we know where disappointed dad comes from.
Exactly. Well, and he was not a disappointed dad. My father was an unbelievably supportive man, and I've always like had this little thing in the back of my mind, like, do I really like that I have disappointed dad? Because that really wasn't my experience. But when he would get disappointed, and he often was in his bathrobe, after doing a crossword puzzle in the morning, and those bifocals would go down on the end of his nose, and so there's a little bit of my dad in there, but in a very loving way.
Cool. So, Jen, and hopefully that answered your follow-up question. Being bad at data structures, how do you succeed in that? I mean, there's unfortunately a big part of our interviews in the tech industry are demonstration-based, where you have to demonstrate the skill that you have. We're one of the few industries that make you prove you can do the job in order to get the job. And I think it's an unfortunate part of our interview process that so many companies think that HackerRank and Code Wars and LeetCode are sort of the metric by which to measure how well you can program. But it is going to be a necessary thing to go through. I think if you can focus on like some of the more popular algorithms and not all of them, because memorizing all of them to me feels like a waste of time, honestly. Unless you're going for the big FANG companies, there are only a handful of them that you really need to know. I would say traversal algorithms and probably arrays are probably going to be the big ones to really understand. Like when you hear a problem, go, oh yeah, I need to use an array for that. Here's how I'm going to sort of dive in and practice that a little bit. I've got some videos that you can go check out on my YouTube channel that have that focus specifically on LeetCode and how to do LeetCode smarter. Because I think it's too easy to get caught into this mindset of I have to grind LeetCode, I have to do 500 problems, 700 problems, 900 problems, and you really don't. I think once you kind of learn the basics of what those algorithms are, kind of like Mark was saying, like we want to know as a hiring manager that you've got good problem solving skills, that you know how to break that problem down into pieces and then go solve those pieces. Is it the most elegant solution ever? Maybe not, but I don't really expect that from an entry-level developer anyway. Even most senior-level developers, like I just want to see that you can get something working. Like, am I going to hit a deadline if I hire you? Like, that's more what I'm worried about than, like, is your code like the most beautiful, elegant piece of thing I've ever seen? I'm less concerned about that. Now, big companies, FANG companies, they do care a lot about that and how optimized everything is. And so if you want a job at a big company like that, then yes, you are going to have to go through those kinds of hoops. But I think that can also be kind of a dangerous metric too, that you have to go get a FANG job to feel successful in this industry.
Yeah,
I've been doing this a long time. I absolutely feel successful. Mark's been doing this a long time. I bet he feels successful doing what he does. So you don't have to go get a job at a Google or a Facebook or an Apple or a Netflix or whatever to prove that you're a good programmer. So hopefully that'll give you a little bit of encouragement that, yeah, you are going to have to go learn some of them, but you don't have to go learn every single pattern out there, and you certainly don't have to grind hundreds and hundreds of problems. But doing enough of the problems to where when you see a prompt, you're like, that sounds like a depth-first search. These are the 4 steps I need to solve any depth-first search. So let me go apply that and then figure out like what else I need to do around that. I think you're going to get a lot farther, and you'll get farther faster. So go check out those LeetCode videos. It'll tell you a little bit about how you can reverse engineer other people's answers to help with pseudocode and so on as well. Serotonin, good to see you in chat as well. Had a really great tech interview and one absolutely terrible experience. I think it shows what an interviewer company knows. I think it shows when an interviewer company knows how to use tech interviews effectively. Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. They followed up and said, I do interviews for a support engineering role, which is highly technical compared to many companies, and we have our candidates give a presentation on Kubernetes targeted towards non-technical audience. Very cool. That's really great. One of my best interview experiences, recently was back in January. I did a job hunt myself, and they're like, all right, we want you to, hit this endpoint, get some JSON data, and we want to like calculate some statistics on it. I'm like, okay. That's great. And it wasn't like any of this, like go find the nearest latitude and longitude points, or go find like the 10 closest latitude and longitude points to a target or whatever. I rant about that one because I also had that one back in, I think, November, early December last year with a company. And that company does absolutely nothing with geolocation. It's like, if you even did a little bit of geolocation, I can understand why you're asking me that problem, but like, you don't do anything like that. Like, scheduling conflicts and meetings and things like that is like your bread and butter. Like that has nothing to do with just geolocation nonsense. And so I absolutely loved that interview because I'm like, okay, well, in a real production system, I would be, I would be doing try catch, watching for exceptions, and, I'd be watching for error conditions coming back. Just for the sake of the interview and time, let's assume it's always up and we'll go down the happy path and, assume this is always going to work and this is how I would do this. And that's all the interviewer wanted to hear, is that I knew what to go do in a real system, and then just getting through the programming side of it. And yeah, I was able to kind of calculate. They wanted like the min, max, and average and mean, and I'm like, can you remind me the difference between average and mean again? Like, it's been a long time since I've studied that. And they're like, okay, this is how you figure that out. I'm like, okay, cool. Built that into the code. It worked great first try. I'm like, all right, that's awesome. Like, that's exactly what an interview should be. Like, this is what I was going to do day by day on the job. They were, it was a back-end developer role to like calculate those statistics and push that onto the front end. I'm like, that's exactly what this job is. Like, this is what an interview should be. Like, demonstrate you can do these exact skills. I think that makes for a really good,
I see a question here from Janan about more off topic to career advancement, but how do you stay motivated when coding all day? Which is, it's actually a topic I was talking about the other day. I think I was tweeting about it or something. One of the things that we all have as developers is like that first spark you had, right? That first time you were programming, and well, at least I had it, the amazement of seeing hello world pop up on a screen and whoa, I did that. It was this really cool feeling of, this is why I want to be a programmer. And these sort of experiences, they happen periodically throughout your programming career. Lately I've been working on shaders, which for some reason shaders have just been something where I'm like, whoa, this is so cool. It's going onto the GPU and doing stuff. And
can I interrupt real quick?
Yeah. Yeah, there you go.
I made a hexagon shader that actually animates and puts different levels of opacity and whatever. I saw that on your stream. I'm like, I want to do something like that, but I did it in HTML and JavaScript, and I'm like,
okay,
look at this janky front end code I know how to write.
No, but it's great. For me, it was like this whole thing, like, holy cow, I do this and it's going on a GPU, and these lines of code are changing my video. The other one I've had is when I started doing like Internet of Things kind of projects where
those are great.
I was making LEDs blink and stuff, and it was like, oh wow, my code is actually doing this physical stuff in the world. Notice none of these things are my work code, right? I think it's very rare that you're doing something in your day-to-day work code that's going to be that kind of crazy spark. I mean, I've had a few of them with my project where all of a sudden I'm having this realization that people are really actually using my product out in the field, and that was this really good boost. But I think as developers, keeping some of that spark alive is, in terms of motivation, is really, really important. And so finding things that are going to amaze you and doing side projects that can bring some of that spark back. For me, it brings me back to my roots with programming. It really puts me in a place where then I even go in doing work code the next day, and I'm a bit more excited about my work code because something else that I did for programming got that excitement going for me. So I think that's a really good way to keep motivated, as you go through kind of your career as a coder.
Yeah. And I think taking breaks, I think, is also important too, because you're not just going to sit at your desk and do nothing but write code for 8 hours. Like, that doesn't happen. Like, even as a senior dev, I don't sit down and write code for 8 hours at a time. Like, occasionally my Twitch chatbot and, stuff that I programmed to make the lights blink, like, I'll start working on that after a stream, and the next thing I know, it's like 3 or 4 in the morning, and I have spent like 7 straight hours working on that, and it's like, okay, sometimes, but like Mark said, it kind of like, it sort of scratches that itch a little bit of like, cool, now I feel like I did something really productive, and the next day when I know I'm not writing code, I'm like writing blog articles or doing little video tutorials and things like that. It's like, I can do that with a smile on my face because look at that problem that I solved, and now I can make these lights blink and, have all kinds of fun with that. By the way, there's channel point redemptions that you can do if you want to change the pattern on here. You can do like exclamation point nano leaf, and or you can do like exclamation point help. Yeah, all kinds of fun stuff. I love working in IoT, like seeing sensors and stuff like that work. Like, I actually got a microwave movement sensor off of Amazon. They were really cheap. They were only like $1 or $2, and I had it like over at the workbench that you can't really see. It's off camera here, but I had my kids stand on the other end of the basement, like 30, 40 feet away, and gradually like do this and kind of
Yep.
wave at
Yep.
me while they were walking closer until I saw the LED kick on this tiny little sensor that I'm just holding
Mhm.
really, really still facing them. And then we measured how far that was, and it had a good 30-foot range on this
Nice.
tiny little microwave sensor thing. It cost like $1 on Amazon. And
Yep.
I was able to wire that up on a little like ESP32 or an Arduino or something like that, and just I could make an LED turn on when it saw movement 30 feet away. I'm like, that's fantastic. I love tinkering with like real world kinds of stuff. And so I've got all kinds of little things. I've actually got this one here that I enjoyed building. We only recently unplugged this from the wall, but this is one of the first IoT things that I built around the house. And it's a little particle board. If you know of particle, they make this little Arduino capable board. And I basically soldered some LEDs and buttons on here. And it basically, when they hit the button, it would make that LED blink for 60 seconds, or so they thought. And it was a timer to brush their teeth. And I'm
Ah.
like, you don't have to sit there for minutes and minutes brushing your teeth. Just hit the button. One of you chooses blue, one of you chooses green, and you hit that button and it's going to blink. And when it's like 10 seconds left, it'll blink twice as fast. And then you know you're almost done. And then you're done brushing your teeth. Well, what they didn't realize is with the particle board is I can push code remotely. And so I could log in remotely and go 75 seconds, 90 seconds,
Yep.
100 seconds. And I was
Yep.
like gradually taking this thing up to where they're like, how much longer do I got to brush my teeth? I mean, they had really great teeth for a while.
Yeah.
And then we unplugged it and then it started going downhill. But just coming up with something really simple, like simplistic, not simple, but like simplistic of just you get a real world idea and this whole thing. I mean, that particular board was about $20, but I mean, probably less than $2 of other components and an old cell phone charger to power the thing.
Yep.
But you can buy little boards now. Instead of $20, you can buy an ESP board for $3 or $4,
Yep.
and it's wireless and Bluetooth, and you can do all kinds of fun stuff with these things just with a little project board at home. It really doesn't take too much effort, but it's good for the problem solving aspect of trying to build things. Yeah, and you're building your little ski
Yeah.
sensor
This was
thing.
the light controller,
Oh, nice.
and we actually on stream we did a PCB
Oh,
for it. So
nice.
there's the
Oh, you got your
puppies,
dogs on there. That's
the
great.
dogs on there, and then
Fantastic.
they're also my little logo and stuff on there. So it's good to have fun.
Yeah, for
It's
sure.
it's
Oh, that's great.
it's actually good for the brain and good for the soul.
Yeah. And like even stuff on your channel, Mark, like you've got like the LED panel, where if,
Yep.
if someone highlights a message and it actually draws their avatar and then like any emojis, provided it didn't like there was that one emoji face or something that it was like breaking. But
Yep.
like programming all of that in that matrix, to kind of scroll by a couple of times, like those are just fun, geeky little things that you can just kind of
Exactly.
continue to hack on to, like Mark was saying, to just kind of spark that passion again of like, why did I get into this? I think it's important to really remember like what got you interested in programming and coding.
Mhm.
And sometimes like I'll talk to students, they're like, well, I'm finishing up this boot camp or I'm finishing up, my college or university program, and I have no idea what I want to do. I'm like, well, why did you get into programming in the first place? What did you envision yourself doing?
Yep.
Or was there something about um, whether you wanted to be in gaming or something like that? But I usually tell them like, hey, if I could just pay all your bills for the next year, what kind of code would you write? Like, what would you do? And I use that just kind of as a thought exercise, just to kind of get them thinking a little bit more about like what's their passion, what's their interest, you know, where do they want to spend time, what would they rather be doing? And I think it makes a big difference, when you can find that motivation uh, and start to really, uh, revitalize that interest.
Yeah. And it exercises different parts of your brain. I mean, it's the brain's not a muscle, but it's a muscle. You can almost treat it like a muscle, right? And it's actually why I will occasionally go in and do a few leet code type problems. I tend not to do leet code. I tend to do more. There's an old it's Project Euler. I don't know if you've
Oh
heard of
yeah,
Project Euler.
Euler is great. I send people there all
Um,
the time just to practice pseudocode. Yeah.
Yeah, and the difference with Project Euler is they're much more mathy in general. It's less algorithm, more math, and trying to break down the problems from that. And I occasionally, when I hit a hurdle, I'll stop doing my work code and I'll go work on a Project Euler problem for a little bit, and it just gets you thinking in a different direction. And more times than not, all of a sudden on that other side of your brain, it kind of pops in, and you're like, "Oh, wait a second," and you
Yep.
you go back. So
Yep. Yeah, I like sending people over to Project Euler, like I said, just for the pseudocode side of things. Like
yeah,
if you go look at their archive, number 19 on the list is between January 1901 and December 2000. How many of those days or how many of those months started on a Sunday?
okay,
And it's like, okay, well, you could sit down, you could write the code, and you get the answer. I think it's 176 or something. But like, it's really just the practice of how do you break that down into steps? Well, I've got to
yep,
loop over all the years. And then inside of each of those years, I have to loop through each of the months. And inside of that loop, I need to know, okay, what month is it? If it's February and a leap year, well, shoot, how do I know if it's a leap year? And you've got like a function that can give you like a true false on that. And then say, okay, well, if it's February and a leap year, then I need to add a day to however many days are in my month because the end of my month, the next day is the start of next month. And so as
hmm
you're looping through the months, you know what day of the month you start on. And if it's the first, then you take up a counter. And so it's just, how do I come up with those steps? Like if I had to describe that to one of my kids to go solve, what would I sort of describe to them? And I think that that's the whole idea around like pseudocode and problem solving.
yeah,
How do you figure that out in just everyday language? And I think that that's a good way to get started. And again, it can, yeah, I like your idea where you just take a break from work and just go distract yourself with something else, whether it's
yeah,
blinky lights or a Lego set, or just find something else that you can take a break from what you're doing. Because if you just sit and slam your head on the desk, you're not going to make any progress. And I
absolutely,
think I think it's important to know when you're no longer making good progress. When I was a teacher, we called it unproductive struggle. There's
yep,
productive struggle where you're like working through different things and you're gradually making progress versus typically what we'd see is students kind of spiraling the drain where they try the same thing, that didn't work, and they try this and that didn't work, and they try this and it didn't work, and then, well, did I already try this other thing? It's
yep,
like, yes, you've tried
yep,
that 5 times now and it's still not going to work, right? Like what's that saying? Like going to a movie and expecting the ending to change. Like,
yep,
you're doing the same thing, you're going to get the same outcome. Like it's not going to magically, the Titanic's not going to not sink that time.
yep.
you know, no matter,
The
it's just
door's not going to be small enough that he couldn't fit on. It's a
oh, that's great. But yeah, there's, I think finding a way to sort of distract yourself and
yeah.
you know, go videotape your dog and make your dog write code. Or,
I don't know anything about that.
no, 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 not at all. Mark, it has been an absolute pleasure. I know we've been going for a while. I really appreciate you taking some time and talking us through kind of your journey into tech.
Yeah,
It's always a lot of fun just hearing someone else's story. I think giving perspectives and ideas and hearing someone else's journey, I think can help a lot of other people understand like you're not alone in it. Like
absolutely.
you might feel alone in what you're facing, but you're really not alone. In the tech industry, there's a huge community that want to
Yep,
see you succeed and want to help you out and want
yep.
to offer advice and ideas. And whether it's a channel like mine, a channel like Mark's, there are so many channels out there where people like Techie Girl. I've hung out on your stream a bunch where you talk to people about getting jobs, and like there's just so many cool people that you can go hang out with and just hear their perspectives. And I think it's important to hear lots of perspectives too. Don't ever just
Absolutely.
listen to my advice. Don't ever just listen to me. Like I've got ideas too. I've been in management and director roles and all that stuff too, but I always tell people like it's important to hear lots of opinions and advice because then you form a better opinion yourself. So
100%.
find a community that you can be a part of. If you want to come hang out with us on Discord, I've got a Discord channel. You can go check it out. And you're welcome to join us over there. We're a pretty supportive bunch. I love helping people find jobs. I love helping people figure out how to position themselves for that kind of thing. So, Mark, as you work yourself towards sort of this end goal that you've got, I mean, I'll definitely keep in touch with you too. Um, so yeah, thank you for sharing your story with us. Everything from skiing to canoeing and ski, like automated ski camera stuff. Like I can't wait to watch some ski cam or whatever you're gonna call it. I'm sure you'll come up with some clever name. And love hanging out on your stream. Like the work and effort that you've put into just setting up your stream is fantastic. And again, I feel very
Thank you.
honored that I got a message on the for real chalkboard in the background.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that was fantastic. So thanks.
Absolutely. Well,
That
thank
really
you
made
so
my
much
night.
for having me. It was a whole lot of fun. Believe it or not, I actually lurk quite a bit in your stream. It's at a
Awesome.
time of day where I'm like wrapping stuff up,
Starting to
so
wind down
it's
a little.
quickly more lurking. But it was a lot of fun to come on and chat about stuff and tell a few stories, and it was fun. I hope chat enjoyed it. Everyone seemed to have a good time. So
Appreciate
thank you for
everybody's
having me.
questions and for RC Maniac and Techie Girl and Wolf and others that helped share ideas and advice in chat. Thank you so much. I really appreciate everybody else kind of chiming in and sharing their ideas and stuff too. Serotonin and others, Heisen and those of you that ask questions and Steffi and so on. Thank you so much. I appreciate always when questions come in. It helps kind of move the conversation along as well. So
Yeah.
thanks for hanging out. We're gonna find somebody to raid here too. Let's see. I know Chrissy's online. That's kind of a given. Should we go raid back into Chrissy?
Sure, and then she'll give me a hard time for being up so late.
Yeah, for sure. All right, sounds good. Well, let's go set up that raid, and we'll see you over there. Make lots of noise in Chrissy's channel. Make sure. All right, folks. We'll see you. I'll be back on Sunday. So on Sunday we're gonna have a guest on the stream. Actually, I'll just do this real quick. So on Sunday we've got Kieran, who is an instructor at a code school in the UK, and we're going to talk to them about how they work with their students around getting jobs and so on. The other thing that I wanted to mention is the fundraiser that we're doing. We're going to start kicking that off again in December, and I built out a whole bunch of these little kit cards. This is actually a catapult kit. Um, so this is one. It's a little flimsy by itself, but it makes it really cool. This is the catapult that I talk about on the stream that we use to fling dog treats. But I also found a whole bunch of other really cool things like Star Wars ships, and I've got some Star Trek ships. And you basically just break the parts off the card. We got some holiday trees if you're into like Christmas trees, and one of my favorite ones so far. Actually Johnny Five. You remember Johnny Five from
I do.
what was that movie? Short Circuit.
Short circuit.
Yep,
Yep.
found that one. But check out that orange color. I found a land speeder.
Ooh.
And so yeah, you basically just break all the parts,
Yep.
and you can just snap them together. It's like the old snap models that
Yep.
maybe
Yep.
you did as a kid, Mark.
Oh
So
yeah, I did plenty of them.
yep. So these
Painting
are the
with a little brush.
oh yeah, yeah, the tiny little sample bottles of the enamel paints.
Yep. Yep.
So these are the kinds of things that I'm looking at for the October giveaway. So finding ways of like printing large bundles of these as the giveaway, and you're going to get like a whole mess of these things in the mail. I've got lots of different colors and things like that, so I can do your Christmas trees in sparkly green or gold or whatever. I've got tons of filament colors. So I'm going to start producing some of these, but that's basically going to be our giveaway for October. If you want to just straight up donate, I would rather do that than have subscriptions. Just because I get more money through Twitch when you donate as opposed to the subscribes, and then I also match all that money. So all the money that you give through bits and subs and ads and all that stuff, that's all going into that pot, and I'm matching all of those dollars. So I appreciate any effort on that throughout the month of October. We're going to kick that off in a couple of weeks. But Sunday, come back. We'll be chatting with Kieran from Academy.tech. And Mark, thanks again for sharing your time with us tonight.
Very welcome.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for
I'll
having me.
be lurking on your stream in the morning too. Yeah, let's go set up that raid over to Chrissy, and we will see everybody over there. Does Kieran's last name start with an O? I forget, but you can go check out the website techinterview.guide. The schedule is up on the website, so you can find it over there. All right, folks, we'll catch you over on Chrissy's channel. Have a great night, and we'll see you on Sunday. Cheers.